The International League of Peoples Struggles, ILPS, is organising a month of solidarity throughout February to further mobilise the solidarity of the world's people with the Indian people's struggles for democracy and liberation. The Indian people have been suffering from attacks on their living standards and social rights, and they are facing reactionary legislation and other fascist repression aimed at preventing them from asserting their very basic rights as peasants, workers, farmers, minorities and others. The mass demonstrations involving hundreds of thousands that have been taking place, as we've just seen, and the mass strikes that have involved 250 million workers or more in solidarity have been a magnificent and inspiring response to the reactionary Modi program and atrocities. Late last year, the ILPS organised support and solidarity for diaspora Indians globally who mobilised against Modi's atrocities, such as the Activities Prevention Act, demanding its repeal, the fascist violence against minorities and other violent and fascist acts against the Indian people. The ILPS and its member organisations, country-based chapters, regional committees and commissions across the globe and other allied networks are dedicating the month of solidarity in February to online and offline activities which will shed light on the wonderful struggles of the Indian people and intensify international solidarity with those struggles. At this launch of the month of solidarity, you will hear key speakers expand on some of the issues facing the Indian people and how they are dealing with their struggles over these issues. Again, we welcome all of you to this launch of the monthly solidarity with the Indian people, and thank you for your support and solidarity. Down with Modi and his imperialist supporters. Long live international solidarity, and support the struggles of the Indian people for democracy and liberation. Thank you.
हिंदू, सिख, बौद्ध, जैन, ईसाई, पारसी समेत सभी माइनॉरिटी को यहाँ पर नागरिकता देने का रास्ता प्रशस्त हो रहा है।
मैं इस बिल को फाड़ता हूँ, ये हिंदुस्तान को तोड़ने की कोशिश करता है। India has passed a new law that will make it easier for non-Muslim minorities from neighboring countries to gain Indian citizenship.
दिल्ली की जामिया मिलिया इस्लामिया यूनिवर्सिटी में छात्रों पर दिल्ली पुलिस ने बर्बर तरीके से लाठीचार्ज किया है।
This is what happened inside the library of Jamia Millia Islamia University.
ना हिंदू खतरे में है, ना मुसलमान खतरे में है। धर्म का चश्मा हटाओ, पूरा हिंदुस्तान खतरे में है।
हजारों की संख्या में महिलाएं यहाँ पे मौजूद हैं, लोकल महिलाएं जिनका शायद ये पहली बार प्रोटेस्ट का एक्सपीरियंस होगा।
Several celebrities who've taken to social media to voice their objection to the passage of the bill.
West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee is currently leading a massive rally against the Citizenship Amendment Act.
बच्चों का यही काम रह गया था, बच्चों को पढ़ाई कराओ यार, बच्चे देश का भविष्य हैं।
रामचंद्र गुहा साहब, इनको पुलिस ने गिरफ्तार किया है। यहाँ पर
सैकड़ों हजारों प्रदर्शनकारियों को डिटेन किया जा रहा है, उनको ले जाया जा रहा है। हम चाहते क्या?
We are here at August Kranti Maidan in Mumbai, where thousands of people have gathered to protest against the Citizenship Amendment Act.
मोर्चा काढलेला आहे।
तुम आंसू गैस उछालोगे, तुम जहर की चाय उबालोगे, हम प्यार की शक्कर घोल के उसको गट 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 पी जाएंगे। हम कागज नहीं दिखाएंगे, हम कागज नहीं दिखाएंगे।
ये झूठ है, झूठ है, झूठ है।
German student at IIT Madras was asked to leave the country immediately after he attended protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act.
यूपी भवन घेराव करने के लिए जामिया के छात्र पहुंचे।
Congress party is holding flag marches across the country.
प्यार से बोलो, आजादी को जोर से बोलो।
Shaheen Bagh continued to protest and ushered in the new year.
घर वालों से, सगे संबंधियों से ये नंबर डायल कराकर नरेंद्र मोदी जी के समर्थन में अपना एक मिस कॉल कीजिए मित्रों।
हिंदुस्तान की अवाम को, जनता को बेवकूफ बनाया जा रहा है।
In Kerala, Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan has moved a resolution against the CAA.
Having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular state.
I am brutally attacked by sugar mass. I don't know, I've been bleeding. आजादी, आजादी, चप्पल चप्पल गूंज उठेगा इंकलाब के नारों से।
मेरे अंदर अब कोई डर नहीं है और मैं बहुत ही ज्यादा और दृढ़ता से ये संघर्ष को आगे बढ़ाऊंगी।
तो एनआरसी के साथ मिलके ये बहुत ही एक लीथल कॉम्बिनेशन बन जाता है।
द वायर के और वीडियोस देखने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें। स्वतंत्र पत्रकारिता की आर्थिक मदद करने के लिए डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए गए लिंक पर जाएं और अपनी राशि चुनें।
আমার পৰিয়ালৰ 15 জন মানুহ এতিয়া আমাৰ NRCত নাম অহা নাই 2015ত আমি এপ্লাই কৰিলোঁ দুবাৰ এপ্লাই কৰিলোঁ এতিয়া নাম অহা নাই এতিয়া লাষ্ট ফাইনেলত নাম অহা নাই এতিয়া আমি আকৌ এপ্লাই কৰিম আমি অসমৰ মানুহ ভাৰতীয় মানুহ
We've been told that 1.9 million people in the state of Assam have been excluded, and it's unclear what will happen to them. Now, they will have the chance to appeal, but once that appeal process is over, then what? Do they go to a detention centre, or are they deported? And if so, where to? Because neighbouring Bangladesh says that it won't be taking these people. Now, the whole point of this exercise, the government says, is to crack down on what they say has been a decades-long problem of illegal immigrants coming from nearby Bangladesh. But critics of this process say that it targets minorities, especially Muslims living in Assam.
ল'ৰা ছোৱালীবিলাকৰ নাম আহিছে খচৰাত কিন্তু আমাৰ গণিয়েকজনৰ নাম অহা নাই গণিয়েকৰ নাম অহা নাই তেওঁলোকৰ ৰেকৰ্ড দিছোঁ মাকৰ ৰেকৰ্ড দিছোঁ বাপেকৰ ৰেকৰ্ড দিছোঁ মাটিৰ ৰেকৰ্ড দিছোঁ বা এই ভোটাৰ লিগিছি চব দিছোঁ দিয়াৰ পিছতো নাহিল কিয় নাহিল
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone. Greetings of solidarity. I am Paul from the International Coordinating Group of ILPS Commission 10 and part of the Global Secretariat of the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation. Welcome to our webinar on CAA, NRC, and Minorities, or the Citizenship Amendment Act, the National Registry of Citizens and Minorities. This webinar is organized by IPMSDL, ILPS Commission 10, supported by many of our partner organizations and solidarity initiatives for the Indian people. This is also part of the February 2021 Global Month of Solidarity with the Indian peoples, with the theme Support the Fight of the Indian Peoples for Democracy and Liberation. We are also live on Facebook of ILPS Commission 10, IPMSDL, ILPS, ILPS Asia Pacific, and CNS. Just to give you a brief introduction of the organizing movements and groups, the International League of People's Struggle, or ILPS, is one of the biggest anti-imperialist and democratic formations. It supports and develops the anti-imperialist and democratic struggles of the peoples of the world against imperialism and all reactions. The ILPS Commission 10 is one of the 20 concerns of ILPS, which focuses on the rights of indigenous peoples, national minorities, oppressed nationalities and nations for self-determination and decolonization against discrimination, racism, and national oppression perpetrated by imperialism and local reaction, while IPMSDL is a global movement of grassroots-based indigenous peoples organizations and advocates committed to advancing the rights of indigenous peoples to self-determination, land, and life. So about our discussion for this day, taking off from the issues and struggles that took the global spotlight in the few years or few months, our discussion will try to bring forward the Citizenship Amendment Act, the National Register of Citizens, and its impacts to the minorities, indigenous peoples, and wider oppressed sectors and classes in India. With this webinar, we wish to understand the situation, lay down the background, and unpack the intersecting aspects about CAA and NRC and people's rights, and try to locate it on the wider international struggle and global uprising against discrimination and oppression. And in response, it's equally important to know the people's resistance. Ultimately, at the end of the webinar, we look forward in identifying steps to build greater international solidarity and unity in upholding the right to self-determination and liberation from the clutches of imperialism and local reaction. So I know this is a very, very interesting and exciting discussion, so let's not keep it long. To start our discussion, and to give an overview of the whole issue at hand, with special stress on the indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities concerned on the CAA, we will have one of the ILPS International Coordinating Council members from Manipur in Northeast India. Let's listen to Dr. Malem Ningthoja. Malem?
Thank you, Paul, and greetings to all. I would like to thank ILPS Commission 10 particularly, and the Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation for taking up this opportunity to organize this program. And I would also like to thank all other technicians and organizers who are behind these programs. And I would also like to thank Ravi and Siba, who have agreed to be part of the panel that we're going to discuss. I will not go much into detail, but let me focus on what I am supposed to speak about ILPS. I'll do a slide showing PowerPoint presentation. I think it's visible now. Well, the Citizenship Amendment Act came into being in 2019, and the NRC issue erupted again between 2013 to 2019, and it's an ongoing process. There was stiff resistance to CAA, that is Citizenship Amendment Act, and also protest against National Register Citizens. Unfortunately, the movement died out, temporarily halt because of the COVID pandemic situation. And I'm sure that when the situation has been improved, most of those people who considered that they are being affected by CAA and NRC are going to again erupt. But for today, let me just briefly focus on an overview picture. CAA is a mechanism, that is Citizenship Amendment Act is a mechanism to grant citizenship. But again, NRC basically is a mechanism to identify citizens and exclude. Both are interrelated. CAA is functional without NRC and the enforcement of Foreigners Order of 1946. These are all interrelated. But then, as I said, Citizenship Amendment Act was adopted in 2019, but there is a recent prehistory to 2019. Let's begin with 2014, during the Indian Lok Sabha election. The election manifesto of the BJP clearly spells out that some mechanisms should be carried out to grant citizenship to certain groups of peoples belonging to certain countries, whereas to exclude from granting citizenship to certain categories of peoples. And before the Citizenship Amendment Bill was introduced in Parliament, they have already made some changes in 2015. This has to do more with the passport entry into India Amendment Rules 2015 and Foreigners Amendment Order 2015. These two rules incorporated the changes which are to be found in the Citizenship Amendment Bill. I will tell it afterward, but let's go to the chronology for the time being. And after the rules and orders were adopted in 2015, 21st December, Ministry of Home Affairs come up with a circular asking for any objections or suggestions or comments on the process of enacting a CAB, that is Citizenship Amendment Bill. 2015, the same year, on 19th July, CAB was introduced in the Parliament. There was stiff protest by many people. As a result, in August 2016, the bill was referred to a joint parliamentary committee. The joint parliamentary committee went to different stakeholders, had lots of talks, but the agenda was very clear that it was a committee formed primarily to collect information but justify the bill. There was no substantial changes. As a result, in 2019, after some years, on 7th January, the Joint Parliamentary Committee came up with a report. Within 24 hours of the publications of the submissions of the report, the Lok Sabha passed the Citizenship Amendment Bill on 8th January 2019. There was stiff protest, and then the Congress party, the opposition party, walked out of the parliament, and then resistance took place in several parts of the country. But it's a time of elections again. The Lok Sabha election was coming up. There was political problems. As a result, the bill was not tabled in the parliament during the assembly's parliamentary session, and there was a slight relief to some people. However, in May 2019, the BJP came up with a huge victory in the Lok Sabha elections, and they are in almost with a huge margin. As a result, on 9th December the same year, CAB was reintroduced in the parliament. And on this 10th December, that's the International Human Rights Day, the Lok Sabha passed the CAB. And 2 days after that, the president gave assent to the bill and it becomes an act on 12th December 2019. That's the brief chronology of the CAA. But the crux of the issues in the CAA is that this act facilitates grant of citizens to migrants belonging to 6 religious groups. That is Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Parsi, and Christian communities from 3 supposedly Muslim-dominated countries. That's Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And citizenship will be granted to them on the basis that they have entered into India on or before 31st December 2014. That's where the resentment and dissension begin. But why? What's the reason of enforcing the CAA? And I have found out that there are 3 basic reasons. Number 1 is overt justification. What do I mean by overt justification? The belief is that in the election manifesto itself and in several other circulars, the BJP have pointed out that that primarily the Hindus in those 3 countries were being persecuted. Many of them were being persecuted, or they are suffering from the fear of being persecuted. And the idea of PIO, that is persons of Indian origin, and homecoming came into play. That is India should be the homeland of the Hindus, and whosoever migrated elsewhere can come back anytime when they think that they are being threatened somewhere or being persecuted. So the propaganda of persecution and fear and the concept of PIO and homecoming interplayed, and it was the justifications for granting indiscriminate citizenships to those who were hitherto being considered as illegal immigrants. They have to be granted citizenship. That's the overt justification. And one of the covert exclusion is related to hate politics, or say call it demographic politics. In fact, the Hindus constitute about, according to 2011 census, 79.8%, and the Muslim is the next demographically dominant group. And these are followed by the Christian, Sikhs, and Buddhists and Jains. And there is a hate politics which keep on circulating that the Muslims are a threat to the country. That has been the generalized perceptions, and it has a long history as well, starting from the colonial period onwards. And the Hindu Muslim politics have been there, and the BJP seems have taken up this issue, and the covert exclusive kind of politics came into play. And this has to do more with the whole idea of national security, wherein the loyalty versus threat perceptions were created. And it was verified in 2019 when the Ministry of Home Affairs come up with an advisory which says that illegal immigrants are a threat to the country. They may join the terrorists, they may infiltrate, they can become a threat to the country, to the politics, economy, etc., etc. So a kind of threat and fear directed against what is being called illegal immigrants have already been circulated by the Ministry of Home Affairs in 2017. But when the Sikh, then Christians, Buddhists, Jains, and Hindus, and the Parsis, when these illegal immigrants belong to these communities, have to be incorporated as genuine citizenship based on the perceptions that they are peoples of Indian origin. Now, the politics of identifying the Muslims of other countries as not people of the Indian origin came into the focus, right? And in this demographic politics, what is very interesting is that the Sikh, Buddhists, and Jains and Parsis are demographically very small. They may not be considered to be a threat. At the same time, most of them are bound by the Hindu Marriage Act. This is my understanding. So they are being treated like a sister communities belonging to the Hindus or connected to the Hindus somehow, or in one way or the another. But the Muslims have been isolated and totally being looked upon with the politics of covert exclusions and with the perceptions of hatred and projection of them as some kind of security threat and etc. That's the whole reasons being either openly or in a covert manner being articulated by the government for the introductions of the act and the passing of the act. Now, if you see if you see the larger pictures here, this is the map that I have sent you. The blue is India, and I have tick mark those which have to be included and cross out which have to be left out. Interestingly, there are protests and dissensions, charging that it's totally anti-secular and etc. Or said it is being looked upon as a Hindutva agenda favoring the Hindus. But now, if you see the exclusion here, is you will find that it's not only the Muslims which have been left out. Like if you look at the extreme border on the corner side within the circle, it's the northeastern regions. Well, the Muslims of these three countries, that is Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the Bangladesh, and Muslims and others have been left out. At the same time, there is lots of illegal immigrations from Myanmar, which happens to be largely Christians, but they have to be left out because no provisions for any immigrations from these countries have to be. And what about Sri Lanka? There are large-scale refugees of peoples belonging to the Tamil Hindus who are now migrating to India. What about their conditions? Why are they not being given a complete grant of citizenship in the same manner that the citizenship have been granted to peoples, the six religious communities from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh? The reasons have not been cited out. But there are certain problems. I will not go much into detail about this because we have 2-3 speakers who would specialize on the issues, who would elaborately speak on these issues. But the point is, like, there is a mainstream protest, and one of the mainstream protests is fight Hindutva agenda or Hindu chauvinism or whatever it is, or the Hindu reactions, or call it fascist or whatever terms that you may give. But, that's the dominant theme. And the other theme is defense secularism and humanitarian law. And this comes into being because India doesn't have a refugee law, where to accommodate and how to accommodate the refugees. Therefore, anybody who comes from outside, whether refugees or so, are being broadly being granted as illegal immigrants. Although there are exceptions based on the UN provisions for the refugee, because India is not a signatory to the 1951 UN Conventions on Refugees, but there are certain modalities that it adopted whereby selectively it granted some kind of refugee facilities to certain select group of people. So the mainstream protests are basically on the basic two themes. I'm sure the next speaker, Siba, will speak on that. She will talk more about the problems that it has created to the Muslim immigrants plus the other non-Muslim immigrants, and the perception will be based on humanitarian laws and the idea of secularism. She will definitely focus on that. But the protest in the Northeast has a totally different dimension. It has an indigenous perspectives, because this Northeastern region, the part where I have crossed out, the circle portion, it's a place where there are 8 provinces. It's inhabited largely by the tribes and the linguistic communities. And India's unregulated mechanisms have created unregulated migrations from different countries, particularly Nepal, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, to an unprecedented scales and without any regulations. So there is unregulated migrations at creating some kind of demographic imbalance. It has a big impact on land ownership, resources, economy, political, social, and cultural traits. We have certain examples of the Assam situation, and we have examples of Tripura, where the indigenous peoples have been completely dominated demographically, politically, culturally, economically, and politically by the migrants. So the peoples in the Northeast felt that CAA is a big threat to them, because it will be an opening of floodgates to demographic invasions. So most of the peoples from the Northeast felt that whether it be Hindu or it be Muslim or it could be other religious group, for them, the things that the indigenous rights would be completely overshadowed by the opening up of the CAA, which will open up the floodgates to immigration. That's somewhat a totally different perspectives from the mainstream protests, where they talk largely about secularisms and humanitarian law and etc. The perspectives from the Northeast was completely different. And although, in the Northeastern regions, inner line permit system, ILPS, and 6 schedules are to be found, or even though Netherlands seems to enjoy certain special provisions under the Constitution, 371A and etc., they all feel that the granting of citizenship to a large scale people will obviously amount to demographic invasion, because they are concerned not simply about illegal immigrants, but also what is being called internal immigrants from other parts of the country. Therefore, the protest against CAA in the Northeastern region, most of the Northeastern regions, has a totally different dimension, and it has an indigenous perspectives. Now, as I said before, CAA is meaningful only when NRC updates takes place. So CAA and NRC has to go together. And this is where the Assam case become an experimental process, and which become highly controversial. I will not go into detail about the NRC process in Assam and the possible impact elsewhere, because we have Ravi, who has worked seriously on the NRC update process and the questions of statelessness. He will focus on that. But suffice it to say that I have drawn out in a brief overview picture. I have a conclusion that India requires to frame a just and humane policy with regarding to immigrant workers and refugees, which take into also account the concerns of the threatened communities of the Northeastern states. So there has to be a holistic approach. This is my understanding, and this is the conclusions that some of us have drawn in relations to CAA and NRC. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Malem. That was a really interesting and magnificent overview, and giving a view of the indigenous peoples, especially in the Northeast, on this really big issue affecting not only India and its neighboring countries. So let's move on, and I want to invite everyone, all our attendees in the Zoom or in Facebook, please feel free to chat in your inputs or acknowledge your organization or where country you're from, so we can acknowledge you later. And for your inputs and comments, you may use the question and answer box or the chat panel in the Zoom, and later in the Q&A portion, we will try to accommodate as much question as we can if we have time. And now to discuss on the secular aspect of the CAA concerning our Muslim minorities, and to ask, is this really just about the Muslim minorities? we have our next speaker. She's a journalist and activist, popularly known as the Lady Flash Protester of Hyderabad, for leading the momentum of protest in Hyderabad against CAA, NRC, and NPR, or the National Population Register. She's the first lady to be arrested for this cause and raising further still. She also led efforts to help those affected by the COVID-19 lockdowns, giving rations to 6,000 families, 75,000 cooked meals spread over 30 days, paying rents, medical expenses, among others. Right now, her work involves supporting underprivileged and underrepresented minorities like the Dalits, the Muslim, scheduled castes, and scheduled tribes, and women's rights. Let's all welcome Ms. Shiba Minai. Shiba?
Hi everyone, thank you Paul for that kind introduction. Thank you Malam for the previous session, that was quite informative. Let me carry on from there and like rightly pointed out, did this have any effect on minorities? Well, yes, because they were definitely the ones that were targeted. So therefore, of course, it did have a certain effect on minorities. But what I want to touch upon today is more about how did it have an overall effect? Because I personally believe that although it was camouflaged and it was hidden under the veil of making it sound and look like it was designed only for the Muslim community, it definitely was not. Because it helped the Hindutva narrative of saying that we want to make a Hindu Rashtra, therefore we want to eliminate the Muslims, was the indirect narrative that was drawn out. And this definitely helped their cause to a very large extent, and it made it look like they were moving towards their goal of making this nation driven by RSS principles. So definitely from the face of it, it looked like it was meant for Muslims and it wouldn't harm anybody else. But that was obviously not true, because it ended up affecting a lot of people. Like my friend Dr. Malam just mentioned, when the NRC was carried out in Assam, surprisingly, there were a lot more non-Muslims than Muslims themselves. That was like a small sample piece or a small dry run that they were doing for the rest of the country. And they were surprised at the numbers that they received. And then they didn't know what to do. And eventually they ended up, by they, I mean the government, they ended up saying, even if you have non-Muslim names in the list, they would be exempted. And statements like that were made without any assurity or guarantee. There was nothing in writing. There was nothing legally bound. Nothing was working out. So it all looked like humbug. So let me quickly touch upon a few things, officially speaking, how, let me first talk about a few myths that are surrounded around this concept of CAA and how it is, how it is perceived. So like all of us know, and like the UN has said, and many other human rights organizations have spoken about it time and again, and they have mentioned that this is one of the most inhuman acts that has been there in place. Also, one thing that the picture that was depicted all through this entire process, especially last year, when protests burst out across the country, just like right now, farmer protests are going on across the country. If all of us know that the farmers are currently protesting in India, and it's one of the biggest protests that human history has seen. That is the amount of number that has gathered to protest against the arbitrary farmer bill laws that are happening. Similarly, same time last year, everybody was protesting against CAA and NRC, about which my friend Dr. Malam has already mentioned. Now, what happened? A lot of people said, but we will still have a safe passage for all Muslims who want to enter the country legally. That is actually true. But what is also true is that by granting a shortcut to citizenship to those communities, except the Muslims, we were relegating them to an inferior status. we were trying to make it look like a certain community is supposed to come second, therefore are going to be like the second class citizens of this country. Um, and we don't want a world like that, do we? I mean, do we want anybody based on absolutely any ground to be treated like second class citizens? I'm sure we don't. Now there was another myth that was being, justified. I'm trying to touch upon a lot of myths that were circulating around, and the people said, it's all right, the CAA is not all that bad, and people are overreacting. And they were saying things like, so I'm trying to touch upon those myths so that we kind of understand how it is affecting the dynamic of the entire country. One other myth that was, I think, popularly mentioned was we are helping all the people who are facing religious persecutions in their home countries. Absolutely right. We should, on any human ground, go ahead and, yes, save people from any persecution, religious or otherwise. I don't think it's right for us to create a screening mechanism where we say, if you're religiously persecuted, then please come in, I'll give you shelter. But if you're not religiously persecuted, say you're persecuted on the basis of gender, or on the basis of your color, or the basis of your background, economic status, is that when we say, we don't need to protect people? Is that what it says? From a human rights perspective, or from just common sense, logically speaking, is that all right? Can we kind of sieve people out and say, I want to help you only on an X ground? So that itself makes it wrong. And now, even if we have to say, okay, let us help people because India is the only country with a Hindu majority, so it's fair. We want to protect our people. We want our people to come back to us because there's probably no other country in the world that has as many Hindu belonging people in any other country in the world. Fair enough. That's a fair point to make. But does that mean that we ignore, like Dr. Malam rightly pointed out, does that mean it's all right to leave our Tamil Hindu brothers and sisters? What happens to the Tamilians? Are they not Hindus? So this, these loopholes are, speak loud and clear that it was not designed for what they were saying. It was not designed for help. It was not designed for rescue. It was not designed to give any kind of, well, I'm saying wars because we're speaking very less about it in the recent past, but it's still, this danger still exists and looms large over our heads because those acts in the constitution have not been shelved yet. They are still there, and the political parties are still talking about it. The government in power very recently made a statement that as soon as the the COVID vaccinations are administered, they would go ahead and bring this entire thing back and start implementing it. For starters, India does not have the bandwidth to do something like this in such a large scale, because from whatever we know of what has happened in Assam, a huge amount of money was spent and the results were almost zilch. And then they ended up saying, oh, but we lost all the data. After the entire activity happened, and and then they created these detention centers and they announced these results, and a huge number of names that came about were not Muslim, like they had targeted and expected. And then they said, oh, but we lost the data, so they were trying to play all sorts of games, and they were probably not achieving too much. And I'm not speaking too much into detail about CAA and NRC because Dr. Malam has covered quite a bit, and my colleague Ravi, I think, is also going to cover quite a bit going forward. So I'm just going to try and focus on the myths or the misunderstandings that people have about it, so that if we ever know that we can help somebody, or we can talk about it and create awareness and let people know that this is not right from any angle whatsoever. Another quick thing that most times that people said is Muslim students are unnecessarily protesting for secularism while they reap the benefits of subsidized education in minority institutions. The fact that this kind of a narrative is being circulated, the fact that you're saying things like they are protesting, but they take advantage of the country, they are protesting and they have, I had one of my very close friends who told me, but you have another 13 countries that are very strong. Why can't you just go to the Gulf? Why are you fighting for this? What is a necessity for you to, raise a voice and say, but why isn't India giving me my right? Look at some of these countries. They told me things like, why don't you look at Saudi? Women don't even have the right to voice their opinion. Shouldn't you be thankful that you have the mercy of being able to, as Indians, we are so merciful that we allow you to talk and you are not being arrested for doing that. And at that time, I wasn't arrested, but let me tell you, for voicing my opinion, I was arrested. And in Saudi, while they do not let people talk, their voices are heard. So I will not justify Saudi at all, because I'm not a Saudi citizen and it's not my business. I'm an Indian citizen. I belong to this place belongs to me. Nobody gets the right to tell me or any Muslim or any minority or marginalized community that, we've done you the favor and you have to repay the favor by shutting up. Firstly, we're comparing ourselves to countries that are not democracies. Countries like Saudi or any other Gulf, most of them are monarchies. They're not at all democracies. They function so differently. And yet, the countries that are supposed to be monarchies, if you have noticed, we have a lot of our non-Muslim friends and our Muslim Indians who work over there, and they're given absolutely the equal rights. There is no comparison in terms of it's not like people who are local are paid more, or it's not like people who are local have more opportunities. No, they don't. The only benefits they have as being locals is they get certain subsidies in education, they get certain subsidies in wanting to build a house, so on and so forth. And I think by all means, I am for people supporting our own kind, our own locals, just like how I'm a big supporter of Make in India products. I'm a big supporter of indigenous, crafts and arts and absolutely anything, like all of us should be. So supporting our own kind is different from demeaning people who belong to other kinds. It's different from saying, I'm going to halt their opportunities, their existence, their identities, and prefer people of, my kind, so to say. Coming back to where I started from, a lot of people also said, oh, but a lot of Muslim students are protesting, Jamia is protesting, a lot of Muslim women seem to be seen. We see a lot of hijabs and burqas and abayas. So that basically is a Muslim problem, and therefore they are protesting. Question. Right now, just in Hyderabad, since I'm living in Hyderabad, I can tell you, just day before yesterday, there was a lawyer couple that was hacked in the middle of the road, and they were fighting for Dalit rights. Again, a marginalized backward. Question to people is, while you're talking about discrimination being only a community's problem, it's not. We are opening the floodgates to something that is unconstitutional. The fact that you're allowing one kind of discrimination, if you think it's all right, means you're opening the floodgates to 500 other kinds of discrimination. Right now, my Dalit brothers and sisters seem to be suffering. I remember during COVID times when we were, when it was at its peak and people didn't have even food to eat and things like that. When I was going into these, these Dalit communities, there is a place called Mangod Basti. It's a slum area that is there in Hyderabad. And it usually has people who work as, like these GHMC workers. They are the cleaners, they are the, the dirt pickers and things like that. I had the police officer who came to me and told me, Madam, you seem to be helping so many people. Why aren't you helping our kind? And I was like, what do you mean by our kind? What is our kind? So he says, but my, there are these Dalit workers, there are these Hindu people. Can you not help them? I'm like, but we've been helping everybody. Please tell me which place that is and let me go ahead and help them. And we started mobilizing help on a daily basis of first 600 people in that community, because that was the only bandwidth I could have squeezed out. So we started doing it for 600, although they were about more than 30,000 over there. We started with 600. And 4 or 5 days into me beginning to help, I have the police slapping charges on me, saying that I'm the cause because of which Corona is spreading even further for attending to that community. So it sort of I didn't understand what was going on and why am I being targeted, because there were so many, the entire civil society stepped up. There were so many people who were mobilizing all kinds of help during that time, people who could afford to help. And why am I getting this charge? Why is being slapped on me? Why am I being told to be responsible for spreading corona? And then one of these police people who had become used to arresting me and constantly putting all that kind of pressure on me, we had also become friends in some way, because every time I would get arrested, they would offer dal chawal, and I'm an absolute not vegetarian. I need non-veg in my food. So that became a ground for our conversations, and these guys would we had, in some ways, we had become like frenemies. We were like enemies and friends sometimes. So one of these policemen very, quietly opened up to me and said, "Madam, वो लोग आपको इसलिए रोक रहे हैं क्योंकि आप Hindus को help कर रहे हो." Let me translate that. He says, they are wanting to stop you because you are helping a community that's a Hindu community, exclusively a Hindu community. And those are the people who are right on the bottom of the chain, and are people who are used by RSS for all kinds of rioting, hitting, all kinds of things. They get into all kinds of troublesome work, basically. And so these guys need to be available for them at their disposal as and when they need. So if people like me step in and mobilize help, they're going to start depending on people like me. By me, I mean others that are outside of, the typical political or the typical RSS or the Hindu heads, or so to speak, that they have. And that was disturbing the idea and the ecosystem that they had created, and they were not okay with that. So they started targeting me, so I'm unable to mobilize help in that area. So understand this dynamic here. One minority group person helping another minority group person, and they don't want that, and they're breaking it apart. Then it became a huge challenge for me to be able to even enter those areas. But let me tell you, I would sneak in around 1:32 in the night to be able to provide food for the next day early morning and things like that. And I did not stop for one bit. Eventually, they ended up giving up. But this is my very personal story. And but this is representative of what is happening on ground. This is representative of, when I'm dispensing help, I'm not thinking I'm a Muslim. I'm not thinking the opposite person around me is a Hindu or a Christian or a Sikh or a woman or a man or a fair person or a dark person, or, or is a rich or a poor. Anybody who needs help is help. We had people who were from upper middle classes families living in palatial houses, but at that time they did not have, the monies for rations. And so we went ahead and mobilized even that kind of help for people from that strata. We weren't judging and saying, but you live in such a palatial house, how can you not afford, your 2 square meals? Somebody reached out to us and said, help, we help. So what I'm trying to say here is, the reason why I'm trying to narrate this story here is, life for minorities has changed quite a bit. There is this massive narrative that goes around them saying that, these are the outsiders, these are the terrorists, these are the extremists, these are the fundamentalists, all these words that should ideally mean, a fundamentalist is somebody who's following what they're following, with a lot of heart, soul, and grit. They're sticking to the fundamentals of a certain belief system. The fact that you are a fundamentalist, if you are, is actually going to help you become a better person. It's going to help you be more, more inclusive, more understanding, more tolerant. But somehow that's been spun around thanks to the, media, and made quite negative. And therefore things have been, more difficult for the minority world. And, compared to the past, and if you compare the past to the present, you will see that there is a lot of division. You can actually feel the heat. You can feel the division. You can feel the fact that people are not willing to work with Muslims as often as they would want to before. Especially if it's a Muslim women, they would probably make it even more. Women come with their own share of problems. And if you're a Muslim and a woman, then I think life is a lot more difficult. And things like this is only making...
We're almost time, so maybe we can wrap up now.
Yeah, sure, right. All right. So yeah, I think I think I wanted to touch upon the humanitarian aspect of this, because I think a lot of technical details have already been given by Dr. Malin and will be given now by my colleague Ravi Hemadri. So I think over to them. Thank you guys. If you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Shiba. That was really an amazing discussion from your perspective, and broadening and busting some myths, which is currently flooding the discussion, these narratives that's dividing, as you have said, dividing people instead of bringing them together. So again, for all our viewers, attendees, please feel free to type in your questions. And also, let me give a shout out to our some of our attendees here from. We have our friends here from Bangladesh, from CHT. We have friends here from Manipur, India. We have Wali here from Asian Peasant Coalition, and our friends from Tripura, Secretary General of Borok People. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We still have a few more topics, but before that, let us show you a short video. And also, we would like to remind everyone to prepare their calls and placards that we will use at the end of our event. This will be our symbolic part in the upcoming February 25 Global Day of Action in solidarity with the Indian peoples for democracy and liberation. And before moving on to our next and last speaker, let us listen first to the song Humde Kenge, originally a poem written by Faiz Ahmad Faiz, which has been a popular anthem actually during the protest against CAA and NRC. So let's watch this.
हम देखेंगे लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे जो लोहे अज़ल में लिखा है हम देखेंगे जब जुल्मों से तम के कोहे गरां रूई की तरह उड़ जाएंगे हम देखेंगे हम महकूमों के पांव तले ये धरती धड़ धड़ धड़केगी और अहले हकम के सरों पर जब बिजली कड़कड़ कड़केगी हम देखेंगे बस नाम रहेगा अल्लाह का जो गायब भी है हाजिर भी जो मंजर भी है नाजिर भी उठेगा अनल हक का नारा जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो और राज करेगी खल्क़े खुदा जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो हम देखेंगे लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे हम देखेंगे
Okay, so the talks about CAA seems incomplete without talking about the National Register of Citizens, or NRC, which equally impacts Indians, minorities, and its general citizenship. To give light on this topic, we have the National Director and one of the founders of the Development and Justice Initiative, New Delhi. He has been working with the civil society organizations in India since the 90s, with focus on rights of marginalized, displaced, and disenfranchised people. He specializes in community engagement, capacity building, advocacy, and campaigning for the rights of the communities. Tonight, let's have Mr. Ravi Hemadri.
Hello all. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Malim. Thank you, ILPS. And thanks to Shiba Minai, who spoke before me. I'm a bit tempted to respond to some of the statements and points made by earlier speakers, but let me not do that. Let me share what I know about the National Register of Citizens and my understanding of what the CAA is all about. When it comes to the National Register of Citizens, what I know is based on the work we have done in Assam in the last about 3 years. We have done research. We provide legal aid to people on ground, and CAA, of course, is. So I have a PowerPoint which I will use, and just a moment. So I will talk about the NRC first, and then I will go on to CAA. Both are really separate. I mean, they are connected in terms of the political intentions of the ruling party and the ruling clique, but technically they are two different processes. So, and my presentation is and our perspective on the NRC is that this kind of citizenship stripping is also very common across the globe. It is not just in India. It is happening in this fashion in a particular way, and the roots of that are different. But taking away citizenship of minorities and migrants is a global phenomenon, and its roots lie in discrimination against minorities. And the same thing we see in Assam as well. There has been historical discrimination against minorities. It's not new, and that discrimination itself has now formed into this kind of a citizenship verification exercise. Just to give an idea of which Malem, of course, has shown that picture. I mean, just for those who don't know where Assam is, Malem, of course, has shown this kind of a picture. I'll not go into that. It's basically the region which is sandwiched between Bangladesh and China to the north, and Myanmar to the east. It's a small region in India. I mean, northeastern region, what is called. It is very linked to the mainland India by a very thin strip of land, and Assam is one of the major states in that. And Assam is extremely diverse. It has a lot of very much a lot of different kinds of communities, indigenous, migrants, and tea plantation workers. And I mean, in Assam, in fact, is a microcosm of India itself. The way India is diverse, Assam is also very diverse. Now, coming to what NRC process is all about, it's actually a process of updation. It is technically considered that it is an updation of an NRC which was prepared in 1951, which was nothing but data taken from the census that was held in that year. So applicants and this current NRC, what we are talking about, has been going on since 2015, and it has come to an end in a way in 2019. In this process, the applicants needed to submit documents of an ancestor dating before 24 March 1971. And that particular date, if you're aware of the history of this region, is the date when Bangladesh became independent.
Ravi, sorry for interruption. You're being requested to enlarge your slide, expand it, and then and there is also a request to keep on clicking your slides so that
is that fine?
Make it full screen.
Okay, just a minute. We did not figure this out yesterday.
Slideshow, Arabi.
Yeah. Oh, you mean it's a slideshow? It has to be.
Yes.
Just a minute. Oh, it will go on by itself then.
If you enlarge it and keep it the slide slow, and you use the enter button, it will click. It will go. every time you click on it. Paul, please suggest, Paul.
Is this fine? Can you see this? Or is it too small?
It's okay for my desktop, but for people,
I don't know how to enlarge it. How do I?
Yes.
Is this fine?
Let me click the slideshow at the top. Slideshow.
Okay, at the top where?
Beside home insert.
I'm sorry for this. I'm really sorry for this.
Right at the bottom.
I did not.
Slideshow button.
Up.
It's right at the bottom. Right at the bottom.
At the bottom.
Next to what is written. Next to that. Still next. No, just next to that minus button. That's fine.
Is this fine?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, all right. So, going back to really the previous one, I mean, what is the NRC process all about? Is that the applicants had to submit documents proving their ancestors lived in Assam before 1971, and it required a whole lot of. I mean, it is not just one document; it's a whole lot of documentation that everybody had to produce. And it particularly excluded a lot of women, because women don't have really the documents to show. I mean, they don't own land, they are married off before they're 18, so they don't have a voter ID card and so on. So the first, there were three different lists that were published beginning from 2018. The last one, which was published, which the government then said this is a final list, which was published on 31st August, and it excluded more than 1.9 million persons. And among this, as I said, particularly when it comes to women, children, and migrants who don't have documentation to prove that they have lived in this country for that long, most of the exclusions have been on their side. Now, these exclusions, what do these exclusions mean? It basically means that people are going to lose their Indian citizenship, and they are at risk of mass statelessness. So 1.9 million is a huge number, which is going to be disturbing, not just for India but also for the entire region. And there have been a lot of writings where people have compared Assam to the Rohingya situation, where there's a history of stripping the Rohingya from their citizenship, and we know what has happened now with almost 10 million of them displaced in Bangladesh. Now, when the last year in 2019, when the NRC was finalized, the government said that those who are excluded, because there was a lot of international criticism, the government said that those who are excluded can file applications before the foreigner tribunals to appeal against their exclusions from the NRC. So basically, the government said that there is a way out, they can appeal against their exclusion and so on. But the fact is that even after 1 year, more than 1 year of this August 2019, almost 18 months now, since that list was finalized, people have not been, the NRC officials were supposed to give rejection slips to the excluded persons so that they can go to these so-called foreigner tribunals to appeal against their exclusion, but those rejection slips have not been given. On the contrary, what the government is talking about is a revision of the included list in the state. And clearly the intention is that more and more people can be excluded from citizenship. Now, that takes us to what these foreigner tribunals are. And really, NRC has become internationally visible, but these foreigner tribunals have been going on in Assam for 4 or 5 decades now. And these are tribunals which function under the Foreigners Act 1946, and where there are the Election Commission officials and the Assam Border Police can catch hold of anyone, charge them as foreigners and take them to these foreigner tribunals, and where it's the same kind of process as NRC. People have to submit their documentation to prove that they have been in Assam before 1971 and so on. And most often, these foreigner tribunals declare people as foreigners and say that these people are Bangladeshis, even though Bangladesh, of course, does not accept them as Bangladeshis. So it's just merely declaring them as foreigners, even while there is no country which which they can go to. So there are foreigner tribunals. There are 100 tribunals at the moment currently, and the government wants to establish 200 more. To once the process of people who are excluded from the NRC go to these foreigner tribunals to appeal against their exclusion. Now, what is the history of this? There has been a lot of Malem talked about demographic change and things like that. There's history to this. I mean, there has been a migration from Bangladesh, and migration, of course, to the entire region of Northeast is not new. There has been a lot of migration in this entire region, and from Bangladesh, what was earlier East Pakistan, and before that it was a part of India, and so from that there has been a lot of migration. But that migration, quite a lot of that migration, particularly the Muslim peasant migration, happened to Assam much before India's independence. So it started in the 1880s when the British wanted more and more land to be brought under agriculture, and so that they can collect more revenue. That is the time when this whole migration from what was East Bengal started to Assam. Then the Assam Border Police was set up, and the foreigner tribunals were set up, and then the whole Assam, what we know as Assam movement in the 1980s, seeking exclusion and deportation of people who are alleged to be foreigners and Bangladeshis started. So the Election Commission was authorized to just put in the electoral rolls, identify people as doubtful voters, and this this unique process of marking people as doubtful voters is there in Assam alone, and people are just randomly marked as doubtful voters. But till 2005, between the 1980 and 1983, a new law was brought up. The Foreigners Act was brought about in 2000 in 1946 by the British at a time of the war. In 1983, a new law which was called the Illegal Migrants Determination Tribunal Act was brought to identify so-called illegal migrants and make them foreigners. But this law was held as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 2005. And that law allowed for the onus of the burden of proving citizenship, and that a person who is accused of being a foreigner was on the law enforcement, on the police, not on unlike the current law which is being used, which is the Foreigners Act of 1946, which puts the burden of proof on the accused. There has been, of course, a colonial legacy to this, and why this? I mean, some of us who work in Assam really see this whole thing as an ethnic conflict between the Assamese and the Bengalis, because it was Bengal which was colonized first by the British, and Bengali people were trained as officers and clerks by the British, and then Bengal was extended to Assam. Assam was made a part of Bengal, and so there was a lot of both the domination of Bengali bureaucrats in Assam, and there was also a Bengali peasant migration to Assam. So because of that, there was a lot of resentment against Bengalis among the Assamese, and that is the whole history of it. And again, in 1947, when India was partitioned into Pakistan and India, there was a lot of migration. So in 1971, when Bangladesh became independent. Just briefly, this is the current scenario. I will not go into much details of this. Now, together with Citizenship Amendment Act, this is a process which clearly targets minorities, because the Citizenship Amendment Act excludes Muslims, and that is where the CAA was brought in to address the exclusion of Hindus and others, Bengali Hindus, from the NRC process. So that is the link between the NRC and the CAA. So CAA basically, what does it do? It is a law that fast tracks naturalization for migrants. Some of my earlier speakers talked about persecution minorities. No, the law doesn't say that. The law does not mention persecution at all. The law does not mention minorities in these countries. The law just mentions these 6 communities from these 3 countries. But the naturalization law has been there right from the beginning of independent India. We have had the naturalization law, where a foreigner who's married and a foreigner who's a migrant from any country who lives in the country for 12 years can file for claiming Indian citizenship. That is what it has been. It is still there. That still remains, despite the CAA, the earlier naturalization law. For the Muslims, this naturalization law for 12 years is still remains in place. So the law is, while it is welcome in the sense that it gives citizenship to migrants and refugees. Particularly in India, we have had refugees from Afghanistan, Sikh refugees and Hindu refugees who came in the early 1980s, and several of them actually remain without citizenship even now. So that is the problem with this law, in the sense that one is that it excludes Muslim migrants and refugees. It excludes also other migrants from refugees from other neighboring countries such as Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Myanmar. Bhutan has seen at least about 500,000 Bhutanese of Nepali origin who were thrown out of the country, who became refugees, who were there in Nepal for very many years. Even now they are there, but those people are not included in the law. Now what is the problem with this law? With this law is that the government is still not certain about what to do with this law. That is the reason why rules have not yet been framed for this law, even after more than 18 months since the law was brought in the parliament. So as I said, many Hindu and Sikh refugees from Pakistan and Afghanistan have been waiting for more than 20 years to get citizenship. So the problem for Hindus and Sikhs from Pakistan and Afghanistan and even Bangladesh has never been a lack of law. Law has always been there. It is more to do with bureaucratic and security exercises in granting citizenship. As far as I know, I work with Afghan refugees in Delhi, Hindus and Sikh refugees. Every application for citizenship of people who have lived in India for many years, that goes to all kinds of security agencies. So only when security agencies clear every single case, then citizens. So the problem is bureaucratic. Problem was never a lack of law for refugees from Afghanistan and Pakistan and so on. So what do we do? What do we as a civil society organization and many like us? This is what we do. We provide legal aid and we provide legal empowerment. We have paralegals. We do lawyers trainings. We campaign for the right to nationality of those who are. Right to nationality is one of the main things in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everybody has a right to nationality. That's one of the fundamental human rights principles. Thank you. There I end. I will take questions if there are any later on.
Thank you so much, Ravi. And yes, we will take up questions. We already have some questions in the Q&A box and Facebook also. We're coming to our Q&A program part. But before that, let's hear from our discussant, our actor, critical analysis on CAA and NRC, an educationist, activist, writer, CN Subramaniam. And CN, you have 10 minutes, and after that, we will go to our Q&A. Mr. Subramaniam, yeah, you can start now. You have 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I will begin with a few broad comments. I do not want to repeat what my earlier friends had said about the problems with the CIA and citizenship register. I will try to focus on certain larger issues which I think need to be talked about. This is about the problem of, I would say there are three sets of issues I want to highlight. First, I want to talk about the issue of migrant workers, the nature of the problem and the larger dimensions of migrant workers. Second, I want to look at the issue of democratic principles in operation, particularly the issue of democracy, secularism, and rights of people. Third, I want to talk about the issue of ethnic identity issue, which particularly pertains to the northeastern states. I think these are the three broader principles, apart from the specificities of the human tragedy which this whole process is causing. So let me begin with the issue of the migrant workers. As we enter the 21st century with the intensification of globalization, it's not just products and capital and technology which is moving from place to place, but it is labor also moving in a very large scale. In an unprecedented scale, workers are moving from one country to another, one region to the other. Part of the reason is not just that there are better opportunities, that people are looking for opportunities, but primarily because of the expropriation of the peasants and the tribal or the indigenous people from their traditional resources, whether it is land or it is the forests or other resources, water resources, and being forced to move out of their area, being thrown into the larger global world labor market. And these people are now being forced in an unprecedented scale to move out. Part of the reason is also depeasantization. It is not expropriation in the traditional sense, but depeasantization through operation of the market laws and the current struggle of the farmers that we are seeing in India. Earlier speakers have mentioned that is an indication of the farmers trying to protest against situation where they're being forced, where farming is becoming uneconomical and they're being forced to sell away their land to corporate houses. So that is the second context. The third larger issue is the uneven development where certain regions and really small pockets are having high employment opportunities, and lot of rural and agrarian hinterland where underdevelopment is taking place, but which is subsidizing the labor which is going to the developed sector. So it's not just they're supplying labor. I mean, they are supplying underpaid, low-wage labor to the developing regions. So there is an uneven development where there is employment opportunity on one side, but with depressed wages, and the depressed wages are being subsidized by the hinterland rural sectors. Fourth point that I want to make here is about, and which is becoming more and more serious by the day, is a global environmental crisis, which is rendering large tracts of land uninhabitable, and productivity of that land is declining, especially in regions on the seaside like Bangladesh and large parts of India on the littoral side. The rise in sea level and the change in rainfall patterns are now driving out people, and in the future this problem is going to increase in an unprecedented way. So we have to look at the issue of migrant workers from this perspective of the future, where millions of people are going to be moving out from their traditional homelands in search of employment and livelihood. And we have to look at their rights and their thing. Earlier, migrant people were in a minority and there were few laws to handle them, and a lot of them were never implemented and most of them were discriminatory. But now the problem is staring us in our face across the globe, as someone else pointed out, and we really need to address this. Now, the migrant workers are particularly vulnerable for a number of reasons. One is they are, from the beginning, they come with a bonded character. They are not free laborers making free choice in the market. They are taken loans to survive in their homeland. And in order to pay off the loans, they have bonded themselves to certain employers to go out and work in a new region. So they are actually not free, they are actually unfree workers. Second, the region where they enter it to, they don't know the language, the local culture, or they have no local contacts, they have no local unions to defend them, and therefore they are entirely seen as alien competitors who work for lower wages. So the local population and the workers are hostile to them. Third is that their illegal status. Most of them, particularly when they move from one country to another, do not go with proper papers. They do not have proper papers. Or if they have the papers, those papers are kept by the employer who has bonded them. So their status as illegal immigrants make them extremely vulnerable and extremely targetable by other local population. So these workers, therefore, are forced to work more for longer hours without any labor protection, any kind of labor laws to govern their work. So this is the condition of the migrant workers across the world, and their vulnerability is an issue of major concern to all of us. And I think we need to look at the CAA and the other things in the context of not just what has happened between India and Bangladesh and Pakistan in the immediate past, but we also have to look at it, what is going to happen in the next 20 years, how this problem is going to increase day by day. This is one set of issues that I wanted to highlight, which I want all comrades and friends to think about. The second issue is one of democracy. India, fortunately, opted for a democratic and a secular constitution based on human rights. Way back when India fought for our freedom and in the framing of the Indian Constitution. These broad democratic principles were never implemented fully, certainly, and were never realized fully, but at least this is the foundational principles of Indian state and Indian Constitution. Liberty, equality, and fraternity are written into the Constitution in its very preamble. But the increasing tendency today is to go back on this promise, which was held out in 1950, of developing a democratically structured society and polity. We are increasingly moving away from those ideals. And one of the core ideals which India had sought to build, it was compromised a lot over its history of 70 years, but still the ideal always remained was that Indian state will remain secular, will not be bound by any religious consideration, will not favor any particular religion, and the state, when a religious principle contradicts the larger democratic principles, the state will retain the right to intervene and sidestep or reduce the area of coverage of the religious ideas. Like when it comes to gender equality or other issues of equality, the state will ensure that equal status of all human beings is ensured. So this is the core principles. And we are now seeing a situation where some of these core principles are being compromised. One another core principle that Indian Constitution adopted was protection, what you will call in the US kind of positive discrimination in favor of communities which are historically deprived, like the Dalits and Adivasis. Shiba had mentioned the problem of the Dalits, who are discriminated against historically for the last 5,000 years. So there have been a policy of positive discrimination to help them, and B, policy of protection to the minority communities for their cultural, for retention of their cultural identity. These provisions are now increasingly being targeted and being negated by the new emerging Indian state. And this is the context in which we have to see the new citizenship laws, which seemingly make a very small issue out of, a few lakh immigrants who may have come to India from Pakistan or Bangladesh, which is eventually in a larger context a non-issue. But it becomes a larger issue because when it is combined with the citizenship register, it means that every Indian has to now prove that their great ancestors, great grandfather or great grandmother were domiciled Indians with documentary proof. And in a country where to this day, at least 30% of the population is not educated, are not literate, expecting that their great-grandparents had documentary proofs of their citizenship or their domicile status is just impossible. Now, which virtually means the entire marginalized Indian population of the poor and particularly the Dalits and Adivasis are threatened with loss of citizenship and being made into stateless citizens. Now, within that category of endangered people, they try to further divide them by bringing in this clause of Muslim migrants from Bangladesh and Pakistan who will not be allowed to get their citizenship so easily. This actually means that if you are a Hindu, you can use this clause to work your way into the citizenship. Because the citizenship, so you can say that my great-grandfather migrated from Pakistan and period, no questions can be asked. Because no documentary proof is required under the law for that. But if I am a Muslim, I'll be called to give proof, and if I cannot produce the proof, I can be declared a non-citizen. So this actually undermines the basic principle of Indian citizenship under the Constitution, that citizenship will not be determined by my religion or my caste or creed or color. Now that is being endangered by this principle.
CN, can we, we're almost time, so. Yes.
Okay, I just make one last point.
Okay.
The ethnic issue. Northeast has traditionally been a hotbed of multiple cultures, who have been constantly migrating, moving all along history, certainly. But over the last 100 years, there has been an attempt to stabilize the populations so that each area gets an ethnic identity. Now, that is being threatened by the huge number of, disproportionately large number of immigrants settling in these areas, which has threatened the ethnic identities of the people concerned. I think these are the three broader issues which I wanted to highlight before this group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cian. That was really an enlightening discussion, giving us a somehow an overall view in relation to what's happening not only to India, the globalization and the plight of our migrant workers, not only in India, but I think it seems the same in also in other countries where people are forced to really move due to lack of better opportunities of work. So right now we are moving on to our question and answer portion. May I request our panelists to turn on their microphone, their videos. I have some questions and we hope to keep our answers short but sweet and direct. So one of our questions from Facebook, just to give the viewers an a picture of the impact of CAA and NRC. The question is, how many are we talking of illegal immigrants have been deported because of CAA and NRC? Do we have an estimate? And how does the systemic persecution of the minorities manifest in the on ground in communities? Maybe I don't know, Shiba or Ravi can give a short answer.
Let me say this.
Yes, Ravi.
When it comes to migration, Shiba also talked about people telling them that why don't you go to any Muslim majority country and so on. Migration does not happen like that. Migration has its own dynamics. For example, there are 20 million Hindus in Bangladesh even now, and there are 500,000 Hindus in Pakistan even now. So just because the government has made this law does not mean that all those people will come running to India. Migration does not happen like that. Migration has its own dynamics. And one of the questions that is there is about how do we resolve this problem? And we are also acknowledging that it's really a problem when indigenous people are being displaced and so on. But let us firstly agree that what is happening through the NRC, the way citizenship is sought to be taken away, is not the way. You cannot take away people's citizenship just like that. And people who have had intergenerational links to Assam cannot be stripped of citizenship. When it comes to migration, people have migrated, indigenous people are being made minorities, etc. It's a larger problem. We need to look at entire this region, including Myanmar, Bangladesh, Assam, and the rest of India. This whole region has to be looked at as a whole, and then we have to consider solutions. You cannot separate out, and then moreover, as
Ravi, there was a specific question about deportation. How many people?
Yes, I am coming to that. Deportation has not happened. Okay. If at all, only confirmed Bangladeshis who came to India with a visa, who had Bangladeshi documents, they have been very few, 10, less than 10. But deportation can happen only when Bangladesh will accept them. How can you deport people without Bangladesh accepting them? India is trying to fool us by saying that all these people will be deported. That's impossible. And how can you deport? And even India will not take. India has huge number of undocumented migrants in the US, in the UK, and all over. And India will only accept those requests which come from the US and the UK, only those people who India will acknowledge as our citizens. It cannot happen any other way. So deportation has not happened. It cannot happen unless Bangladesh says, okay, these are our people. And Bangladesh has a high commissioner, has a deputy high commissioner in Guwahati, who goes around detention centers regularly and to identify Bangladeshis. And when they identify, they too take them back. But those are confirmed Bangladeshis, those who came to India with a visa. They are not NRC excluded or declared foreigners by the foreigner tribunals.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ravi. We have another question here. I think this is from our friends from the International Migrants Association, IMA. The question is, what's the impact of CAA and NRC to trafficking, illegal trafficking, such as in the India-Bangladesh migration corridor? Malem, do you want to answer, or Ravi first, or CN?
No, I have no answer.
Okay. Ravi or Shiba?
Yes. No, let me just give me 1 minute on that.
Okay.
Definitely, I mean, as I said in my presentation, a lot of writers have compared what is happening in Assam to the Rohingya situation. And if this huge number of people, it's much larger number than the Rohingya population. We are talking about 2 million people. So if they are made citizenless, they are stateless, and their citizenship is stripped away, they will be target of violence, as has happened to Rohingyas. They will destabilize the whole region. Not just the way Rohingya have spread all across the region. They are there in Malaysia, they are there in Australia, they are there in Indonesia, they are there in India, they are there in Pakistan. They have spread all over, and they are there in Bangladesh. 10 million people they are there. So similarly, and Assam is on a much larger scale. This is going to not just create a havoc. It's going to lead to a lot of trafficking of women and children.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, Ravi. And I think you have touched this question. So our question is, this is from our friend from Bangladesh, actually. If CAA and NRC is harmful, so which solution or alternative can be appropriate for the minorities and the indigenous peoples? Maybe I will ask, let's have Shiba first, and then Malem, and then Ravi, and then CN. Is that okay? Shiba.
Honestly, I don't think there is one right answer to this question, but what I have been told and what I've been made to understand is that they already had ways in which we could give refuge to anybody that we wanted. We had officers, like Mr. Himadri just said, that we've already had ways with which we could allow people across the border, with their documents and things like that. Maybe we should just go back to that, the way that we verify people before they get into the country, and we figure out if it's genuine, and if we have to do it, go ahead and help them and do whatever is necessary. That probably is the solution. The solution is not to link it with the entire country. Typically speaking, this entire problem is a border-based problem. This is primarily the areas that are around the border. Those are the states that tend to have this kind of problem, like Assam or one of the Seven Sisters and things like that. So in my opinion, I feel don't link it to the entire country. Probably the borders is what should be more vigilant and figure out ways of doing something. And I don't know what that something is. Honestly, I'm not qualified enough for that. All I can say is that firstly, do not link it with your agenda. Second thing is figure out a way to help people and not go ahead and put the entire onus of proving, citizenship of the rest of the entire country. We don't want 130 crore people telling whether they are really Indians or not. So I think the base problem is that.
Right. Thank you, Shiba. Malem, what can be appropriate? What do you
regarding the regarding the CAA, there was stiff protest from the northeastern region. And what the government did at the last moment was that on 12th December, I think, if you remember correctly, 2019, just 2 days after the CAA was adopted, the government extended what is being called inner line permit system to several regions in the northeastern regions that include Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Mizoram, and some other region as well. So the argument put forward by the government was that in the northeastern regions, the CAA will not be enforced in those regions where ILPS and 6 schedules are already enforced. That's the argument being put up by the government. But practically speaking, ILPS and the 6 schedules are not a solutions to the dominations by the corporates and the dominations by the other international finance institutes, and along with that, the dominations in the monopoly market and etc. That's a totally different question. But the government come up with a ready-made solution saying that this in this place, this in this area will not be implemented because there is ILPS or ILPS has been extended, or say there are 6 schedules, etc. That was the solution model being enacted by the government. That's the government's perspective.
Okay, Ravi, what do you think? If NRC, we think NRC CAA is not working, it will really impact minorities and indigenous.
CAA basically is completely illogical. It's completely it's not the right answer. CAA is, it is needed for the refugees, and for that India needs to have a refugee law. People who are, if we are talking about persecuted minorities, even in those 3 countries, and we have had refugees from Afghanistan and Pakistan and so on. So the refugees, right away, they're not asking for citizenship, they're asking for refugee protection. So CAA is completely an artificial law. It is not required at all. That kind of a law, direct straight away giving citizenship to migrants and refugees, is not required at all. And naturalization, as I said, naturalization has always been there. Right from the beginning of India, naturalization has been there. The problem is the bureaucratic red tape involved in it, and securitization of citizenship. Citizenship is looked at as a security issue. So every application of a Pakistani Hindu, of an Afghan Sikh Hindu, goes to every 10 types of security agencies which India has, and every agency has to approve each individual citizenship. That is the problem. That is why we have had from the 1980s, Afghan refugees who came to this country, they still are waiting for citizenship. So CAA is not about them. CAA is about politics. CAA is a political campaign of the ruling party, and a step forward to creating a Hindu. Now we have had Pakistani Hindus who came to the Western states. Many of them were forced to go back to Pakistan because they did not have support. And when we're talking about supporting refugees, it is not just about law. It's about a whole lot of things.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. I think as she mentioned it earlier.
Just to supplement to what Ravi has said about the security questions, how they see the Muslim immigrants as a threat to the national security. That I just mentioned that in 2017, August 8, I think, the Ministry of Home Affairs come up with the advisory circular, which clearly mentioned this. And number 2, yes, Ravi rightly pointed out that the questions of fear and persecutions was no way mentioned in the CAA. But interestingly, the CAA refers to the amended passport entry into India Act, and the other is the Foreigners Amendment Order, and these 2 were amended in 2005, and both the amendment talk about fear and persecutions. So, like, although it's not reflected in the CAA itself, but the other rules and regulations where one deals with the passport entry, and then and the foreigners order clearly mentions the so-called fear of or the so-called persecutions of. So like I was referring to that. In fact, it's the whole set of rules and regulations being promulgated by the government as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Malem, for that. Going back to the question, CN.
You are muted, Paul.
See, there are
Sorry.
a couple of.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Again,
CN.
I want to go into certain larger issues in this. See, India historically, the entire South Asian complex, from Afghanistan to the northeast and the south, all the way up to Sri Lanka, also constituted one larger region where people kept moving from one end to the other, and they kept constantly migrating and settling down in new places. Even today, what you call as the border between India and Pakistan, there are a huge number of pastoral communities which traditionally went across the border every season. Now, once suddenly one fine morning in 1947, you create a line and say that people cannot cross this line, which is an artificial thing. Now, historically, this whole South Asian region has been one population region. People have kept moving to each other. And we need to recognize, see, now the current, like Ravi pointed out, everything has been made into a security issue because these two or three states are fighting with each other. Now, for example, India and Nepal have an open border. No one today is asking about illegal migrants from Nepal. No, there are as many undocumented migrant workers from Nepal as there are from Bangladesh, probably more of them. But they are not a security threat. But why are someone else a security threat who are as indigent, as hardworking, and as toiling as anyone else? So somewhere we need to pose these broader problems before the population and make them understand that larger issue that our children, your children are going to work in new places in the next 10 years. And they're going to be unprotected. And we need to have a humane approach towards migration. I think that's something all of us have to campaign amongst our own near and dear ones for the rights of the migrant people. I think that is very necessary for this process.
Yeah, I think thank you so much for that, CN. We have questions here on detention. I think it was brought up earlier.
Can I just make one small point, which I think got missed out, and I was hoping Shiba would talk about that.
Yes,
I think the great hope the CAA movement gave all of us in India. I think that's one point which I need to be made, because we keep making the point about how bad the government is, but we need to also underline the fact that the movement has given all of us immense hope in the democratic potential of movements in India. It brought together for the first time women who never stepped out of their house who are in Parda. And thousands of women, not just in Delhi, Shaheen Bagh, whose video clippings we saw, but virtually in every major city of India, there were Shaheen Baghs. Women sat out in the open and protested. Initially, it was made out to be a Muslim women protest. But soon enough, they were joined by university communities across the country. The youth of the country actually studying in the universities, frontline universities of the country, came in solidarity with them. And actually, we saw a movement, social movement, unprecedented in the last 20, 30 years in Indian history. Unfortunately, like other people have mentioned, the pandemic derailed the process, but it has revived in some form with the farmers' protest. The farmers are actually following what the Shaheen Bagh women did. They are doing a sit-in protest in Delhi. They're exactly what the Shaheen Bagh women had started. I think that ray of hope should be registered.
Yeah, really hopeful. And we have Miss Shiba here too as our a proven a story, a living proof of how women have started to somehow lead this fight. So another question is on the detention. We have a question here on what are the conditions of people in the detention camps, and what could be the alternative, or what's alternative for the detention? Anyone who want to answer? Ravi maybe, or Shiba, or Malem? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, well, let me say this. We have done conducted studies on detention centers in Assam. There are 6 detention centers. These are basically jails, jails which are converted into detention centers, not properly detention centers. Now a detention center is coming up, a brand new detention center with a capacity to hold 3,000 persons. But on the question of detention, at the moment, the detention centers are extremely inhuman, and there is no enough space, and a lot of deaths have happened in detention centers of elderly people. I mean, there were a lot of elderly people who were charged as foreigners and taken to detention centers. So the health services are not there, the food is not proper, and there's a lot of people who have separated from their children. There are a lot of cases of women who were taken away to detention centers when the children were very small. I mean, 2-year-old, 3-year-old children were left behind, and so on. So detention actually is not a solution at all. Detention is inhuman. It should not be done. There should be one alternative, of course. I mean, in Assam, of course, there is no need for detention at all because they are not proven. They are not proved. The government has not established that they are foreigners. It simply means that the people who are charged as foreigners are unable to produce documentation, and you won't believe. You know, people have been declared foreigners. For example, say if your name is Paul, and in one document your name is spelled as Paul, and in another document Paul, you will be declared a foreigner. On such silly grounds, people have been declared foreigners. You know, in all kinds, names, dates, shift. And Assam is an ecologically fragile region. A lot of flooding happens. A lot of shifting of rivers happens. There are a lot of islands, river islands, which keep on shifting all the time. On an annual basis, displacement happens in Assam, and people are shifting all the time. And this shifting of addresses over a period of 50 years is taken as the basis to say that people are foreigners and they are put into detention.
Okay.
So Assam is not justified at all.
Yeah, thank you. Shiba, do you want to share something on the question on detention, the situation, and what do you think is the alternative?
I think the fact that the detention centers are being made across the country itself is already a sign of how sad this is going to be, because I don't really think that's the need of the hour. I think we are a country that has some of the biggest slums in the world. So there are people who are already living in appalling conditions. Trying to create a certain, jail to put them in, I think their entire concept itself is very unnecessary, highly unrequired. You're spending people's tax money to put people in appalling conditions. I don't think that's really required.
Okay, thank you, Shiba. Malem, Sian, do you want to add something to that?
Yes, the present initiatives on NRC is too late and too aggressive. It is too late because the migration issue is a very old one in the context of Northeast regions. There was strong movement and protest since the 1970s and 80s. But then even the Assam Accord of 1985 was not being implemented. There may be various reasons for that. But now to bring the agreement that took place in 1985 and to enforce it at present after almost 30 years is going to be too aggressive at this moment. And I think it's going to be a complete failure. But yes, of course, we will need a more human and just policy to address the problems of migration, both internal and external, at the same time taking into the sentiment of the indigenous peoples there. But I think the way how it has been doing now, Even many Manipuris who've been living there whose parents have been living there for some centuries have been delisted from the category of citizenship. So it's going to be a total blunder. It seems to me like it's like a game plan just to create communal divides on the one hand and a kind of political campaign just to show that they are favoring certain people. But in practically, I think it's going to be a doom and it's going to be a failure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Madam. Cian, do you want to add something or we'll go to the next question? This is
Go to the next question.
Okay, this one's from Wali Haider from Asian Peasant Coalition. Is there a link on the recent this kind of aggression, attacks, Indian state aggression, with these laws, with these policies, with how the global imperialist power US is acting relating to India? What do you think about this? Is there a link on recent Indian state aggression with the hand of US imperialism?
I would like to make a point on this.
Yes, Cian.
My video is, I don't know, it's not working. I think there are two points that we need to remember. For the last more than 2 decades, we have seen internationally the Islamic communities being targeted as the dangerous community. Ever since the 90s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, imperialism needed a new villain to fight, a new enemy to fight, and that was Islam. And Islam's notion of pan-global brotherhood is what became the target for US imperialism's demonization of a particular kind of people and targeting them. That is the larger context which the US was responsible for creating across the world. Second thing, I think the anti-migrant, anti-immigrant stance which US politics took in the last, during the previous regime, and the idea still continues. It's still quite strong in the US, which is anti-immigrants. And treating immigrants as enemies, as people who steal your jobs, vagara, vagara. So this atmosphere helped the Indian state to legitimize itself, the kind of program that it has undertaken. Whether there is any linear link in the policies, it's too early to say, but there is a larger ambience of targeting Muslims and immigrants, which is there. I would stop with that.
Okay. Does anyone want to add to that? And yeah, if not, maybe that we will have to wrap up our Q&A portion and ask for a closing message, maybe a minute to wrap up our discussion from each of our speakers. And thank you so much for those who have sent their questions. I think there's still a lot more who wants to ask. And sorry, we are really pressed in time, but our emails are open. You can send it to us and I will send it to our speakers and we'll really try to address them. Okay, so just to wrap up our discussion, a very fruitful and immense discussion. I know we really, this is a very nice way to open up again the discussion and to start building just understanding. So maybe we'll start with Shiba, and then Ravi, and then Malem, and then Cian for your closing message. Or maybe to answer the question, what do we need from our international community? What kind of support are we looking at in this CAA NRC on the issues of the minorities, indigenous people, and the citizens? Shiba?
Sure. So I think at this moment, I think India as a democracy is under attack. I feel the entire democracy is being attacked from multiple places, and the entire structure is being sort of, I see tectonical plates shifting. There is an entire foundation that is being hurt at so many levels. And as a famous activist in India, Yogendra Yadav ji. I had the fortune of meeting him, and he told me very interesting thing. He said 70 years back, our freedom fighters had fought for a really long time to give us the freedom and give us the dignity of owning our country, being a citizen, and making our own decisions, leading it and following it on our own wish and will, and being organized. He said we spent that effort. We are done with it. Looks like it's time again to resurrect, bring a democracy back the way it's supposed to be, which means each of us need to fight. And as global citizens, I think all of us sort of need to stand up for each other, keep an open eye, be aware of what is happening, be well informed, because I think Indian media is churning out a lot of things that is not true, that is caricatured in a one-sided manner.
Right.
So very, very important. So I think the one most important thing that I would urge everyone to do is A, be aware, B, be well researched to understand what is really the true side of things. And three, as and when required, I think social media has its own power. Please use that and don't ever think that one person can't make a difference. One message, one tweet, one Facebook, one live, one word, one supportive word, anything and everything can make a difference. So when, as and when, whatever is necessary, please go ahead and support people who are fighting for this cause in whichever way possible. Most importantly, let's be human global citizens and be available for each other, spread so much love, and let not any barriers influence us when it comes to extending love and support to each other.
Thank you so much, Shiba. Malem, do you want to follow what's our call? Basically, what's your closing message and your call to
Ravi will speak now, right? It's Ravi's turn, I think.
Again, Malem?
Is Ravi supposed to speak or I supposed to speak?
Anyone? I think you can follow.
Okay, I would like to say that we, as Comrade Subramaniam has pointed out, we need to look these issues into the larger frameworks of the expansion of global imperialisms and the collaborative roles of the local regimes who took a very reactionary lines. And affected peoples must not suffer from taking all these issues from a very sectarian line and to pursue isolated kind of struggle. The idea that that the CAA would serve certain community is a myth, although it apparently appears to be, but in reality, it will not bring social equity and justice and etc. So this is a threat to democracy. We must resolve the problems of migrations through a just and human policy. That's our principle. So when there is a threat to democracy, call it secularism or whatever, it's a threat to everybody, and everybody needs to understand it. We must not be influenced by the propaganda machineries of those regimes who indulge in communal divide and rule. So rather, people should build up a strength. And ILPS, being I'm a member of the ICC, we believe that it's equally an important platforms and anti-imperialist and anti-fascist platforms that brings in together democratic movements across the globe. So we are all together, and we should learn together, experiment together, and we should build our strengths together. That's the message that I would like to convey.
Thank you so much, Malem. Ravi, and then finally CN. Ravi? I think, Ravi, are you there for your short closing message? Okay, we're waiting for Ravi. Let's have Mr. Subramaniam, CN. It's a closing message or call for our viewers and everyone who are watching us.
Thank you. And I think we really had a nice discussion, and I thank you for that and very penetrating questions. I would like to say in conclusion that every democratic struggle supports the other similar democratic struggle. And provided we are able to keep in touch with each other, learn from each other, and talk to each other. And I think it's very important that all of us share the kind of problems our countries are facing, our people are facing, and discuss this across the globe with each other so that we can all learn from each other. And what we are facing in India is nothing unique. I think every country today is going to face it, and every country will address it in its own way. And it will help all of us to learn from each other and fight independently, but certainly learning from each other and in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, CN. Solidarity, especially in these times, is much needed and urgent. Ravi? Okay, I think Ravi is having some technical problems. So while waiting for Ravi, thank you so much. Right now, we will be promoting our attendees as panelists for our closing action. Thank you so much for the amazing responses from our speakers. I also would like to thank everyone who have attended, watched us on Facebook, many organizations, initiatives, and solidarity groups who expressed solidarity and support in this kind of very important discussion. This is just one of the many activities lined up for this month. As you can see, we will flash the calendar of remaining activities for this February. We are sharing now on screen the wonderful lineup of webinars as part of the February 2021 Global Month of Solidarity with the Indian people. And we hope to see you on our future webinars and discussion, these wonderful questions, insightful inputs. And also, please like, follow, and subscribe to our social media pages, website, and email to get the latest updates on our upcoming events and activities from ILPS, IPMSDL, ILPS Commission 10. And to slowly, and now to, as we are promoting everyone as panelists, may I ask our technical group to do that, and we can open our cameras and prepare our calls. So with the rising authoritarian and fascist rule enabling the oppression, discrimination, and somehow violent laws and rules that try to maintain those in power and forward their elitist politics and agenda, as we have mentioned by some of our speakers, which enable further oppression and the influence of global imperialist and elite powers. Everyone are called to stand in unity with the people of India, and everyone around the world aspiring for a brighter future of justice, democracy, justice, and genuine freedom. There is a greater urgency to build this league of people's struggles, as have mentioned by our speakers, speaking out for those who are marginalized, standing up and learning from people, not only from India, but all around the world, experiencing such oppression. Just like ILPS, which continuously extends its invitation to all democratic movements anywhere in the world. Today is a crucial moment to converge in a united front against fascism and imperialism that diminish our rights and lives, encroach our lands, and plunder our resources, and erase our culture. So may I ask everyone to, for a symbolic action, show of solidarity. Our friends, our technical team will take a picture. At this moment, let's open our cameras and microphone and join our echo our calls to scrap CAA, scrap NRC, stop the attacks on people's democratic rights, to free all political prisoners, and to respect the rights to self-determination of indigenous peoples and minorities. Long live international solidarity. Long live our solidarity to the Indian people and to all our people struggling for their democratic rights, for freedom and justice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me get a picture from our tech team.
So the gallery view so that all pictures come out.
Yeah, can we ask our friends to open their cameras? I think we need to make them co-host.
So stop attack on democratic rights.
Yeah.
Long live international solidarity.
Long live international solidarity. Can we ask them to open our cameras just to show a symbolic action and show our support to the people? And of course, I would like to thank everyone for attending.
We can't open our cameras.
The host has to give. Host has to give.
The host has need to allow us.
Okay.
Long live solidarity.
Long live international solidarity.
And
Long live
CAA and
international
NRC
solidarity.
should be stopped in India.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have a lot of other activities and discussions. We wish to have you there.
Long live
Wish to
international
see you
solidarity.
on our future movements. Again, now can we again put up our calls and turn our cameras and
Long live international solidarity.
solidarity with the Indian people. Stop the attacks on people's democratic rights. Scrap
Long live
CAA,
international
scrap
solidarity.
NRC. No to NRC nor to CAA. Defend the rights of indigenous peoples and minorities. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And I think that's a wrap up for our discussion for tonight. Good evening and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much to all our attendees.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay strong.